Welcome to another exciting episode of Hold My Cutter. We're coming your way here at Burn by Rocky Patel, just a couple blocks down from PNC Park on the North Shore. Greg Brown and Michael McHenry, and our special guest is Pittsburgh Post-Gazette beat writer for the Pittsburgh Pirates, Noah Hiles, who asked us to feature, and we've done this, the gold label Rocky Patel. It is very special, enveloped in a lustrous Habano wrapper from Ecuador. The gold label exudes sophistication from the very first glance. As Noah points out, beneath the surface lies a harmonious marriage of binders. He's such a great writer. He wrote this with Connecticut shade and Connecticut broad leaves, lending to a complex but smooth draw, a symphony of flavors, further progressed by its carefully curated aged filler tobacco from the revered regions of Jalapa and Esteli in Nicaragua.
You know, he went there and ran through the forest.
Yeah.
And he had his quarterback
on a previous episode,
and he was writing the story as he went.
And you'll have to watch the previous episode. Maybe you have, or maybe you've heard it, because he actually did that. Noah Hiles talked about how he got here, how he got to become the Post-Gazette writer. But I guess what we didn't touch on in a previous episode was, you talked about people that you look up to in terms of players, those that you idolized and such. Talked about your favorite stories so far. But what, in your estimation, maybe you can point to other national writers. You talked about Beaver County Times, guys that came before you. Who do you look up to in terms of writing skills, styles, and so forth?
That's a really good question. It's hard to pinpoint one person, right? There's so many just really, really good journalists out there, really good storytellers. Someone that I've always just found very intriguing is a guy named Hunter S. Thompson. He's not necessarily the greatest sports writer. I mean, he is a legendary sports writer, and I just think that his best writing was done outside of the realm of sports. But in the previous episode, I shared the story where I was running with Maya Cochran, the distance runner, and he made himself part of the story. And that's called gonzo journalism, and he invented that form of journalism. Huh. And if you don't know who Hunter S. Thompson is, go on his Wikipedia page and read about him. He is the most interesting human that has ever lived in his life. Did you know who that is?
No. But I'm going to read about him.
I'll just say
Hunter S. Thompson.
See, before today, I thought that he was the most interesting human that ever lived.
The end of his life, when he died, his funeral consisted of Johnny Depp shooting his ashes out of a cannon off top of a mountain.
That sounds something that may be what I want my life to be.
Yes, Hunter S. Thompson. So, but like as far as inspirations
go, cannon?
Out of a cannon, ashes out of a cannon on top of a mountain.
I kind of want my body to be shot out of a cannon.
Okay.
Is that weird?
Not at all. Not at all.
But
you're not weird at all.
Stay tuned on Hold My Cutter.
I grew up reading a lot of the people that I've been coworkers with now. Just before, when I was eating breakfast as a kid, our rule was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I had to read something, and I would tell my dad, it was kind of like a book report. While I waited for the school bus, I'd eat it while I would read it while I was, eating my breakfast.
It in your mind.
Yes. Yeah. I would read while I was eating my breakfast, and then while I was waiting for the bus, my dad would say, what'd you read? And it could be from the paper, it could be from Sports Illustrated. So people that I read growing up, Rick Reilly was someone. I think Rick Reilly is one of the best. His feature he did on Marge Schott, the former Red Zoner.
The guy was unbelievable.
One of the best features ever written. Wright Thompson is, I think he's probably written maybe the best story of all time on his story he wrote about Michael Jordan. Those are national guys. Locally, I mean, I grew up reading a lot of Dejan Kovacevic, who's obviously, I've worked for the guy, and he's got some differentiating opinions, but I read him a lot growing up, and he was an incredible writer. I will say that about him. Jason Mackey obviously filled these shoes before me. I read a lot of his stuff. I read, as someone who grew up rooting for the team before I was covering it,
He's a great investigator.
He is. I equate Mackey to he is a hunting dog. Yeah. You give him a scent, and it could be about anything. It could be investigating. It could be about a feature. It could be whatever. If you give him a little scent, go out in the field and get it. and he goes after it.
Yeah.
But I mean, a lot of people. I mean, Gene Collier, I read growing up. Ron Cook, I think Joe Starkey is one of the more underappreciated writers in our city. There's a lot of people. I mean, and that's what's interesting to me is if you look at the landscape of Pittsburgh media, this is not a huge city compared to Chicago or Los Angeles or New York, but it's a great sports market to work in, right? And if you compare our numbers to what we get page view wise, or the awards our newspapers or our radio stations or our TV coverage gets, I mean, people really want to read or consume content about their sports teams here. This is a sports town. And having grown up with a dad who was the ideal sports media consumer, other kids, when they'd go on road trips, they would listen to music with their parents. I listened to Mike and Mike. You know, or locally, I listened to Stan and Guy, you know, or Mark Madden, or whoever was on ESPN, and then The Fan got invented, and I remember listening to just everyone, you know, Giannotti and so on and so forth, and I kind of got the sense from my family, and they're still like this. They are my audience, and having grown up around my dad and his 3 brothers, and now their kids who are in college, I feel like I have a sense of like, this is what my audience wants to read about. And I think that there's value in that. Just having been immersed in that and knowing what my friends, my family, and seeing, hey, this is what people consume. And from a young age, I was consuming it differently. I was like watching film, where they were just kind of, you know, being entertained. I remember watching Monday Night Football or, you know, Sunday Night Football and listening to Al Michaels and being like, okay, so that's how he brought that up. Okay. Or watching Doc Emmerich and being like, wow, he did not use he used a different adjective every single time. He did not repeat an adjective of a game. I thought that's like incredible. Or Brownie, for example. The first college project I ever did was on Greg Brown.
Wow.
Yes. And stuff like that.
That's cool, isn't it?
Well,
Yes.
What'd you get? What grade, you know?
I got an A.
Thank
of course,
you.
yes.
Of course you did.
Voices of the Game was
You didn't get a
the
B
name of
for
the class.
Brown?
Yes. No.
So these guys, you say, it kind of like when we ask managers know about when they get to the big leagues, you know, who did they either look up to, or many, Shelton, for example, talks about the guys that when he came up, he takes a little piece of different guys.
Which was really cool to hear, by the way.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
the same is true, I guess, for writers.
I think so entirely. If I had to pick one person who I would kind of try to want to emulate, Bill Simmons is a guy I connect with a lot. In the sense where Bill Simmons did not have the traditional media path. He started as a blogger and was so darn good, ESPN hired him. And then he was so dominant at ESPN, he created his own thing called The Ringer. But while he was at ESPN, in the back 9 of his ESPN career, he came up with this idea. What about this sports doc idea? We'll call it 30 for 30. You know, like that was his baby. And now he has his own thing. And just the idea where he was able to make an impact in journalism through film, through podcasting. He is one of the most successful sports podcasts ever. And he's also one of the greatest sports writers of all time. He was a big part, I believe, in Grantland, which used to be a branch of ESPN, which was long-form writing. So I look at him. A guy like Dan Lebitard is another example of a guy who mastered being traditional media, and I think it's important to create your own brand, as long as you don't put that brand above what you're reporting on. That's why I go on, you know, podcasts and shows. I want people to get to know me, the storyteller, but I don't want them to like me more than the story that I'm telling. But eventually, yeah, I think that's the goal. And so those are the guys that I kind of look at now as like, wow, okay, so they use this traditional media as a way to build their brand and establish their own credibility and to take this career path to where they want to go. So I to answer your question, I take a little bit of everyone. I look at, my dad told me this the other day. He said, you've always been someone who reads more than most of the people I know. And I take a lot of pride in that.
That's
because
awesome.
I feel like, you know, in today's world, it's a
great.
lot easier to read or to watch a video or listen to a podcast than it is to read. But the written word, I still think, carries the most validity. So just by consuming content, by reading, I how writers construct their stories. Every time I'm on the road, I always like to pick up a local newspaper.
Oh.
If I'm in New York, I'll get the
Like
Post.
the hard copy?
Yeah, the hard copy. While I'm in the
what is that?
When I'm in the airport, I love doing that. When I'm flying home from a city, because first off, I'm interested in seeing how the opposing beat reporter for the opposing team told the story of the game that I just told. Right? I want to see how the Houston Chronicle guy wrote about that Astros Pirates game compared to how I wrote about it. I want to see, how the Arizona Republic covered that 3-game series at Chase Field compared to how I covered it. How are they deploying their columnists? How are they doing this? And then you can also look at, national columnists and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, you pick and choose. And the way I look at it, and this is something that Jason relayed to me and kind of, I guess, confirmed my thought on it, is you're going to get better. Like, when you're a baseball player and the more you watch baseball as a former pro, when you watch baseball, it's a different experience than when I watch baseball, right? You're seeing how a guy's pitching and going after a batter, and you're thinking, okay, well, the next time I face him, that's a mental note. I'm reading a game story, I'm reading a column or a feature or something like that, and I'm thinking, okay, well, the next time I have something to write about in this type of circumstance, I can pick that. I can pick and choose that. And, and I'm sure you do the same thing
Absolutely.
when you're listening to play-by-play guys on hockey or football or whatever. Like, oh, I love the way they built this up, or the way he described that. It's
Naturally,
just,
of course.
And you don't get that if you don't love what you do.
Yeah.
Right? If you're doing this for a paycheck, which, if you're doing this for a paycheck, you're in the wrong field.
Yeah.
Like, no, that's not to say I'm happy with what I'm doing, and I live comfortably, but you can make more money in finance or something like that. But if you're doing this because you love it, your brain never is completely off, right?
Exactly
You're
right.
always thinking, you're watching the NLCS and you're like, is that Brent Honeywell Jr.? That's a story.
Yep.
That guy pitched 2 innings for the Pirates, and now he's pitching 3 innings in the NLCS against the Mets. Something like that. It's never
Legend.
completely off. And you obviously have to balance it. You don't want to work yourself to death. You don't want to be 100% committed to your career. You want to make time for, friends, family, and things outside of work. But if you love this, you're always kind of thinking about it a little bit.
You're all in.
Yeah.
A very high percentage of it, and unfortunately, friends, family, and so on might suffer because of it. But
Well, and that's why I'm very fortunate. My girlfriend is a journalist as well.
oh, that helps.
And so that is really cool. I remember early on in our relationship, some of the biggest news I've ever broken in my career so far was last fall Pitt benched their quarterback during the bye week. And for most teams, that doesn't come out, especially in college, until the day before the game or the morning of the game. Well, I found out during the bye week, the day it happened, and I broke that news. And then the next day, while my girlfriend and I were at a soccer game, she loves soccer, a source reached out to me and informed me that not only was this quarterback benched, they're changing his position. And some partners of journalists would be like, no, this is my time, I'm working. But I remember talking to her, I'm like, hey, I've got a huge scoop. She looked at me and said, go do it.
That's great.
And sitting there on my phone, writing the breaking news piece, and the tweet, when I broke that story, had like 2 million impressions.
Noah, how about the
Yeah.
rush of breaking a story?
It is unlike anything
It
else.
is, because I'll throw myself in here, but
Yeah.
I was a beat writer. I was the beat guy
The beat Brownie.
for the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
So I did color, but then I also was the beat guy during the week. And so I was up in Buffalo for 5 years. I broke one of the biggest stories in that time as a beat guy, and
What
I'll
was?
never forget it. The general manager got fired.
Okay.
Bill Polian.
Mm-hmm.
And
What's the build up to that?
well,
Because
so-
like
so
you're
back
you're
then,
grabbing
that
all
was-
this
again,
information.
we-
It's a
on
lot
previous
different. Your
episode-
experience is probably a lot different
Well,
than
we talked
mine.
about me being. You called me a Stone Age guy.
No. You called yourself a Stone Age
He
guy.
called me an Ice Age guy.
I said caveman, but
Caveman.
it's okay. Yeah.
But back then we didn't have these. Back then we didn't have these.
Neanderthal.
I'm a
This is right.
Neanderthal. We had pagers, and it was just the beginning of car phones.
I only heard those about pagers and rap songs.
Yes, yeah. But you could go. But you could
Those were used for different things.
Study-
That was not used for
yeah,
breaking news and rap
You're
songs.
the original D-O-double-G. Got it.
Study history. Anyhow, we were at a luncheon, a banquet, and my pager went off.
Will you say that one more time?
We were at a banquet, and my pager went off.
Okay. So what was that like?
You had it on your belt, and it would kind of vibrate.
It beeped.
Sometimes it would
Beeper.
beep,
Yeah.
but you could turn it off the. Back then, we could actually even turn off the sound,
And
kind of like a
then,
phone.
And then what did that box on your hip do?
The box on, and you looked at it, and it said call a number.
Oh,
So I'd go to a landline.
that's high tech, bro.
Oh yeah, I left the banquet and I called the landline.
On a
and
payphone.
Somebody, I don't know who it was. You know, we all have sources, but someone said, "I'm hearing that Bill Polian could be in trouble," which was, I mean, people
Yeah.
talk about the Steelers being big in this town, and they are.
Oh, I mean,
but
the
I
Bills
mean,
in the 90s?
you
on.
have no idea about the Bills. It's even to this day. That is it.
Yeah.
So I got on it, and I actually drove to Rich Stadium. I don't know what it's called now, but and I hung out in the parking lot, and I started making phone calls, and finally ended up calling his house, and got confirmation from his wife, and broke that story. And I, you know, people talk about the greatest moments and stuff. The rush of knowing you've just broken a story, and now you go on the air, like, then you call the station, get me on right away.
Yeah.
We were a news station. Break in. Like, what is it? This is Greg Brown calling. Break into news right now. I said, well, we're going to go up to Orchard Park and to break that story. So
That's awesome.
Anyway, so now your experience.
My
about
experience is, I mean,
You didn't have a pager?
I didn't have a pager.
Okay.
Why not?
Because it was.
I kind of want to bring it back.
Yes.
Right. It's
like
it is
pitchers
like
throwing
it's
200 innings.
It's
Exactly.
such a rush, right? Because I mean, not a lot of people can relate to breaking news, but everyone can relate to. Do you hear this? You know,
Oh, yeah.
that's
Oh,
yeah.
essentially
Oh, yeah.
what that is, right?
Absolutely.
When you're with friends and family, you're never gonna believe what I just heard.
Yeah.
And you get to do that for an audience,
A living.
right? Or a living, right? So, what was my first big one? I mean, I had ones like when I was covering high school, but I guess my first big one on the Pit Beat was I broke the story of when they were hiring the women's basketball coach. And it was just kind of a thing where I remember like my hands shaking because you're typing it
Yeah.
and like, you know, you normally now it gets broken on X, right? And so like you
Formerly known as Twitter.
formerly known as Twitter. And while you're typing it, and like anytime I would typically break something, if I have the option, I like to type it out with a keyboard because I know my hands are going to be a little jittery, and I'm not gonna,
Yeah.
you know,
Do you sometimes do it with your thumbs?
yeah.
Huh. It's impressive.
With my phone, yeah.
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
saying,
that's just impressive, writing a story with your thumbs.
oh
Can't
no, well, I'm
imagine
just
what
saying
mine would
this is
say.
just the original
That's
thing.
just to get it out.
Just to get
Yeah,
it
yeah,
out.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
to get it
yeah.
out.
Which, by the way, is dangerous because you don't want to be wrong.
Right.
But
well,
you want to
it's
get
like
it out.
I
You got to
had,
do it
I
now.
had it made sure. I was like the source who contacted me. I was like, "How confident are you?" Told me. I reached out to another one. They're like, "Yeah, that's what I've heard as well." And I run it by my bosses. I was like, "I'm gonna fire this." And so I typed it out. And I was like, "I cannot believe that was my first breaking news story as a news reporter." I broke some stories earlier in my career, but like breaking a sports story for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and seeing like ESPN credit you, like in the little ticker
Right,
or
so
whatever
you
in the
know-
push notifications.
No, you know that outside of this business, people that aren't in this business just despise that. They dislike it so much that all they care about is getting that story
But
out.
at the same time, they love it if it's not about them.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Don't you agree with that,
well,
though?
it's just more.
They love it if it's not about them. Probably.
Yeah.
Well, I think about the
Because they want to know the
you
truth.
wanna-
the trade deadline, for example.
Yeah.
All the GMs, all the baseball people look down on it. Oh, those are rumors. And all they care about is getting out first, but not be right.
My thing is, if I'm 100% right, you have nothing to be upset about
Yeah.
other than I knew your secret. And
Yeah.
so, like, I go back to what I was talking about when Phil Dracovic was benched in October of 2023. That was the best feeling in the world to me because I knew I was exactly right.
Huh.
I knew to the way it happened, to how he was informed, to how he informed his teammates, and to the the follow-up that happened. Like I remember writing in the original story, he wasn't just benched, he was moved to third string.
How did it happen? Just like
So the way it happened was he was informed They'd fallen to 1-4.
Can we go back a little bit?
Pine Richland kid.
Yeah. For those that are watching from out of town or listening.
Phil Dracovic was maybe the best
legend.
Quarterback prospect that this area has produced in 30 years out of high school. He went to Notre Dame, didn't play there, transferred to Boston College, had a really good first year there. Injuries kind of derailed his second year there. He had 1 year left of eligibility. Western Pennsylvania guy. His former offensive coordinator was coaching at Pitt at the time. They bring him in the transfer portal. And Pitt, as we see this year, is typically a team that's always one quarterback away from being a decent program. They always have a good line, always have a good defense, always have a good run game. They need someone who can throw the pill. So this was supposed to be the answer to their problems. So they bring him in, and it didn't go well. Through 5 games, they won 1-4. He was a clear problem. And so I had asked after those games, after the last 2 or 3 losses, is there any consideration to maybe making a change? And that got shot down real quick. But going into the bye week, I had my antenna up. I was like, this could happen.
What made you think that?
Well, just because it was like,
it was obvious?
It was obvious,
okay.
yeah.
Okay. I know somebody was tipping you off.
And it was more like a thing where if it's not going well, maybe it's going to happen.
Okay.
So, but that's your instinct of, all right, now I need to start reaching out or whatever. But in this case, for this one instance, someone contacted me and they said, I heard from someone that this is happening. And if you don't have sources, that's worthless. It's I heard from someone.
Sure.
But they reached out to me because they knew I knew people who would be able to, they maybe wouldn't tell me it, but they could be like, I don't know how you heard that, but that's spot on. So I spent the rest of the day kind of talking with people and saying, this is what I heard, this and that. And I eventually got the full story. And that was one where the best breaking news is not only when you can break it with a tweet, but when that tweet includes a story.
Did you talk to him about it?
I didn't talk to him, but I had some very, very, very good information. And being able to reach out to my boss and say, hey, I'm writing this now. I'll be tweeting this. I'm going to have this filed at 3:15. At 3:30, we need to publish this. And because the sources that I talked to said, this is going to get found out in a couple of days. You should break it now because you have the exact truth. And when you can do that, that's incredible.
That rush.
That's an incredible feeling. I remember, just tweeting it out and being just seeing the reaction. And it's not even a thing of, pat yourself on the back, but it's just cool because that's, the ultimate. That's like hitting a walk-off home run. That's what everyone kind of wants to go after.
And I guess that's what people outside the business don't understand.
Yes.
They just don't get that. That's a great point.
And if you're,
that's what you, that gives you so much credibility. Now people want to listen to you.
Yeah, they
You're
want
the
to know what's
guy.
next.
You're the guy.
And if you're right, so the next day I broke the story that he was moving to tight end. And so I remember that week, this is college football. The coaches don't necessarily love the idea of you knowing stuff that they don't want you to know. So that first Monday after the bye week, we have this press conference. They update the depth chart. And I was curious as to how they were going to handle it. They didn't say a thing. This whole week, I was the only one to report this, and it's just sitting there. People confirmed the tight end thing. But I'm like, well, let's see how this goes. So we get to Monday, we show up, the depth chart, indeed, it showed him at number 2. And I knew that wasn't true. Yeah, they do that all the time in college sports. But then he went out of his way to say he's still a quarterback, when I had heard from 4 different people that he was taking practice reps at tight end.
When people are saying that, are you starting to get worried at all that they're so set on, no, he's still...
Because the people that I had heard it from, it was it's just, you don't get access to practice when you cover college sports. You get one 10-minute window and you're not allowed to report anything that you see. So it's the people that I heard this from, I'm like, no, this is true, and he doesn't have to tell the truth because there's no way we would know unless we heard it from people who saw it. So when he said he was a quarterback still, I questioned him. I said, so did he take reps at practice at tight end? And he said he didn't do anything in the team session as a tight end. I said, what about individually? Did he run routes as a tight end? And the coach looked at me and he said, I have no comment.
Uh-huh.
And I just smiled.
Got him.
And he goes, what? Oh, because he ran a couple routes, he's a tight end? And I said, I'm just asking. You know? And it's like, you just confirmed that. And a couple weeks later, sure enough, he says in a meeting, yeah, he has been working at tight end. And it's just moments like that where you get it. Or another big one that I had, yeah, like when you can break the news of a firing. Like I broke when they fired Frank Signetti. And I remember coming back from that one, I had just, in this past weekend, I'd covered Pitt basketball all week in New York. And then that Saturday morning, I woke up at 3 a.m. to catch a 5 a.m. flight to Durham to get there for a noon kickoff. Covered that game. That was the last game of the season for Pitt football. Next morning, I woke up at 3 a.m. again to get a 5 a.m. flight back to Pittsburgh. I'm exhausted. I haven't slept hardly at all. But I knew, I'm like, they're going to have to be firing coaches today. So I'm exhausted, but I'm like fighting back sleep because I'm like waiting. I'm like, I'm going to get this text. And sure enough, it came. And being able to break that one when like every fiber of your being is saying, just go to bed. Who cares?
Yeah.
But then when the boss texts you.
That means you love what you do.
Yeah. It's just like, yeah, no, I'm going to get this done.
Yeah,
and whenever I get this done, and breaking news stories are also another reason I love them, the easiest ones to write. You don't have to be creative.
Yeah.
It's just, this is what happened.
So,
and then whenever they release a statement, you copy and paste their statement quote in there, and it's easy, it's done.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to be the devil's advocate, kick you off the mountaintop now. What about a story you got wrong, or a story that you wish you would have wrote, or a regret you have, because obviously nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
And how do you handle that? Because that's got to be tough. Because the opposite effect, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't help you in any way.
No, I mean.
But it's going to happen.
It happens, yeah. And I think it's. I've always, in like everything that I do, I've never tried to pretend like I know everything, right? Like there's certain situations where like, if I am next to Brownie and I see Brownie, spill his drink, and I have like a video of it, and I send you the video, I'm like, here's Brownie spilling his drink, and you report that. Like you could stand on that, and you're just like, there's no way I'm wrong. But most of the time, you don't know if you're 100% right. So you try to be as right as you can. But if you end up being wrong, you got to own it. Or at the very least say, this is what I was told. That's a very common thing that I don't think a lot of people, consumers, get, is that you're only as good as your sources, and sometimes your sources get played. Sometimes people know who your sources are, and they know that they can get something out of them. They can, if it's maybe to make you look dumb, if it's to get a narrative that makes someone look bad or good.
Well, agents do that all the time.
Agents do that all the time.
Agents do that all the time.
Agents do that all the time. And it's not just agents. Front offices will do that, or athletic departments or coaches. I know, like, a coach, say a coach is upset with how his player is performing at practice, if he's showing up later, if he's being a jerk to his teammates, or if he's showing up overweight. If there's a writer you've known for 20 years, it's beneficial for you to maybe leak that and kind of light a fire under his rear end, and say that. And that might be that coach's truth, but that might not be the whole truth.
Yeah.
But you've got to say
what you got.
Yeah, you got to say, look, this is what I reported. I remember one thing that happened with me this year is I reported that Joshua Palacios was getting called up. Remember that? Yeah. And then he didn't get called up that day. He was there the next day. But I heard pretty credible information that he was coming.
Right, I got a question for you in that respect. Yeah. Do you think teams, if they see that, might say, okay, hold it, don't, is it possible they would say, don't bring him up, let's wait?
No, not at this level. I do think that happens at college.
I mean team. I'm not talking about specifically the Pirates.
I don't think that happens at pro sports. I think pro sports, because of the money that's invested in it, you're just going to do what's best for you.
But you could see
in
college teams like,
in college,
don't do it now that it's out there, hold off.
If they can make, if it's a move the size of something where it's like they can maybe make it look like they were in control the whole time and you weren't necessarily right, they'll take their foot off the gas and prolong that. And my instance with the Palacios thing, I think a couple contributing factors led to a change in the decision. But I knew that this guy was heading to Pittsburgh and going to be on the Major League roster, but some things either didn't come to fruition or changed, and it was a day off. But that was a weird day, right?
Well, how soon after did he get called up?
The next day.
Oh, the day after the day off.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you were right.
Or no, it wasn't a day off. They played a game, but
Do you have to own that when you, because you were wrong?
What I reported was, I tweeted the next day. I said, what I reported this day was this. At that point in time, that's what I was told, and I believe that was true. Things changed.
Well, yeah, but anybody could do that, right? To play devil's advocate, anybody could throw it out there, and then you could come back and, didn't happen, things changed.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure some
Yeah,
writers
I'm sure
do
if
that.
you did that a lot, eventually it's going to ruin your
I'm
career.
not- you know, don't you think some writers
I
probably
get
do that?
I mean, maybe, but I mean, in that case, like I said, like I think what happened changed, and that's what I said.
Yeah.
And that's what I rolled with. And if I'm ever adamantly, another instance, one instance where I do think I was played a little bit was when Pitt was looking for an offensive coordinator. I think that one of the people that they were interviewing was simply taking interviews at Pitt to try to get more money from the place he was currently at. And they recognized that
Which
I
is
was
very common.
Yes, and they recognized that I was a writer that had broken a lot of news on that beat. And so they went to me and said it made it look eminent. And so I kind of highlighted this guy as like, it seems like this is going to be the guy. And he wasn't the guy. And in that case, it was like, I had to basically say like, yeah, you know, this is what I was told. Apparently wasn't true. You know, and that's a tough pill to swallow, but guess what? You know, like, sometimes
That's the
you're
nature
wrong.
of the beast, right?
Right, that's the nature of the beast. And like as long as you're saying, you know, like, as long as you don't speak it as if it's fact. Like, if someone tells you it's fact and you say it's fact and it's not, if you say Michael McHenry just signed with the Red Sox for $10 million and it didn't happen, then you guys say, well, that didn't happen. But if you're saying, hey, I'm hearing that this guy is the favorite here and he doesn't end up being the favorite and getting hired, it's like, hey, well, what I heard was wrong. I was wrong. And then you just got to be right the next time. And
How much fun is the MLB trade deadline for you as a writer? Is it fun or is it too exhausting? You'd prefer
It's a little bit of both. To be honest, you get to a certain point in the deadline where the national guys are just going to kind of get all of those things. That's kind of just the payoff.
You have to kind of concede to that?
Yeah, I mean, you try, right?
Why is that, by the way?
I mean, that's their job, where I'm writing 100 game stories and features on one team. These insiders, their job is to just follow transactions.
Yeah.
If that was 100% of my job,
Yeah.
I'd probably be able to have more transactional news as well. But that's one element of many things that I do. And so it's tough. And also because those guys, they work for bigger national outlets, they have bigger platforms. The people who leak that stuff to them, it's more serving to their sources to leak it to a guy with 100,000 followers as opposed to 11,000 followers or something like that. So, and especially just 1 year into being on the beat, you know, like you just got to have the realization where it's like, yeah, I'm not there yet. Maybe one day I will be. Maybe one day I won't. Who knows?
No, are you and Andrew Destin kind of co-beat writers?
Yes.
And is that just how you're going to go along for a while?
That's the plan. We're just, you know, a tag team duo.
How do you get assigned games? Do you pick them yourselves?
Andrew and I are really good friends. We were really good friends before this. And I think we work together incredibly well. I think we complement each other's strengths. So every Monday, I'll FaceTime him, and I sit there with a pen and pad, and I'm like, all right, here's what I'm thinking. And you base it around your life. You know, like, hey, ideally, if I could just show up to Clubhouse and not have to cover this Thursday game in June, would you be able to take the game story and to make it up for you, I'll have the big Friday feature, you know, or something like that. And you plan it out. Or, hey, what are you working on? You know, who have you been talking to? Oh, okay, well, I got this thing on O'Neill. I got this thing on Skeens. That maybe we should run this next week. Or maybe, you know, you coordinate it. And if you have a really good team, you're able to decide. It's no different than deciding who gets an off day in the lineup or who's pitching on what day. You just kind of coordinated it and based off of also travel schedules. If Andrew gets back from a 6-day road trip, I'm not going to be like, hey, man, need you to write all 4 game stories for this 4-game series coming up. It's like, take a break, dude. You want to show up to the ballpark and just talk to guys, and you work on features this week. I'll work on game stories, or vice versa.
If we didn't read the bylines and we just read the game story, would we know what clues would I have knowing it's your story or his?
Andrew's 1,000 times smarter than me. So if there are bigger, better words, no. Like if you see the word mercurial or something like that, yeah, that's. I don't know. I mean, the game stories are interesting because your game story at times can only be as good as the game that you watched.
Oh, so you sound like a broadcaster,
right?
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah. Like how many? If you're making
You can
a
only spin it
reel,
so many different ways.
if you're making a reel, you're not really picking out a 7-1 loss, right? I mean, it doesn't necessarily need to be all walk-off home runs,
right?
But like, there's just certain things where, and like I remember talking about this over the weekend with Stephen Thompson, the kid who replaced me on the pit beat, and just you wanna always write the best story possible. But it's like playing 160 games in the big leagues. You can't sprint to first on every weak ground ball or something like that. Or I'm just saying.
Wait a minute.
Or maybe you can't go.
And that's it.
No.
This edition of Hold My Cutter.
Maybe you can't. Maybe that wasn't the best example. But
No, it was not a good example.
Okay, it's not a good example. Or you can't. You've got to be able to realize it's like, I'm not winning a Pulitzer Prize on this story. It was a 5-0 win on a Wednesday afternoon. I just need to tell the story of the game. And you save the good games is when you're going to sit down and say, I'm going to really lock in and I'm going to be given extra 100,000%. And that's not to say I'm dogging it on the other ones, but you have to realize, like it's, I give a full effort every time.
Well, I can't ask you this because you guys split the season, so I can't ask you. What and in fact, I think
Who had a better record?
I could be wrong, and we'll have to talk to Hannah Mears about it. But I bet you that was an incredible awakening for her, because it's the first time she covered a team. I think she did probably 140 games,
something around there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I bet you. Haley did the others, maybe Dan, but that's.
You pick and choose.
Incredible grind.
When your job is to
Jason
tell
Mackey,
stories.
He used to do the.
He used to do the bulk of it. Yes, and you can't tell, front page story every day. It's just not possible.
You try though.
You try, or you recognize that maybe the biggest story that came from today, like we talked about in the last episode, is something that needs more time to tell. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit, my game story, but it's like, we're going to put a pin in that, and this can be my Friday feature. Even though this game was played on Tuesday, if I take 2 more days to look into this, because I have a deadline to meet and everything as well, I don't have time to sit down and comb through 2 hours worth of stats and get secondary quotes. But if I just mention this here, point out that it happened, make it the lead, and then on Friday I'm going to really dive into it, I think that that's how you do a good job on the beat. And being able to recognize, and communicate with your beat partner, like we'll communicate during the game. Was this game worth 2 stories? Or is the game story just enough? Or did you see anything that happened pre-game, post-game, during the game that we can use later in the week for our weekend features?
Wait. So you guys decide whether there are 2 stories to a game?
We decide whatever we write.
You and Andrew?
Yes.
Wait, so there could be 2 stories to the next day?
There could be 3. There could be a whole bunch.
Wow, see, that might be another episode, because I not having been a writer, but boy, I think that's, I don't know. I think that every game, we talked about this earlier, about every game has a lot of depth to it, regardless of what the score is.
We cover an hour pre and post.
This is no disrespect to you and Andrew and the Post-Gazette, but going on the road, when I get a hard copy, maybe, or online, of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, or there are some other cities that cover baseball, this is the way to cover baseball. I mean, I think you guys do a great job, but I'd love to see more.
So, I'll push back on this because the element here was we have, unlike other papers, we have 4 columnists at our paper.
Okay.
So it's more just, well, what are they going to write about?
Oh,
you know,
okay,
and
right,
stuff like that.
That's different
and,
also.
And you might just see it.
You got to include those guys in the...
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
So,
well,
and like for...
all right, that's different.
And that's where it's... You have to account for that. And also, and we have... The way we like to do our coverage is we have weekly things. So is something happens on a Tuesday. Well, is this something we can cover in the podcast on Wednesday? Is this something we can cover in the mailbag on whatever day? Is this something we can cover here and there? It will be addressed. It's just not maybe in the traditional sense where it's 3 stories. Because at the same time, I guess, oppose what you just said, if you're writing 3 stories every day, one of them's going to get buried. And if it's a relevant story, then maybe you can pick and choose the right time to tell it, and it'll get more eyeballs.
Here's my philosophy just in general about every town, every reader, every listener, every human. There's a Pied Piper mentality that if you lead the way, people will follow. So I'm sensitive to this. I think that when the Pirates start going bad, as they have in the last few years, all of a sudden people
tune out.
People tune out because the station, and I had an argument with 93.7 The Fan and got my hand slapped a few years ago about this on the air. They were talking about attendance and so on. I said, you guys can determine how that is. You guys. The more you talk about a team, even if they're bad, you can find good stories. You can find interesting things.
There's always good stories, but I think there's,
and by the way, and educating the fan.
Right.
Is important.
I just think there's...
But how much does the fan? I mean,
there's a formula.
I agree. I feel like a lot of times the fan has.
Okay, that's just one element, by the way.
Yeah, we've fallen in love with the narrative instead of actually looking into the depth.
My point is, would you rather read about, Alika Williams going 2 for 3 in a game, or would you rather me sit down with him the next day and talk, hey, why'd you go 2 for 3? Oh, because I went to this place in the off season and I made some change. Like, you can get more to it than, like we said, like, yeah, you could write 2 or 3 things every game. But sometimes it's just more of a sense where it's like, note that and expand upon it later. It's having the touch and feel to say, is this a 2-3 that night? Or do these 2-3 things play into something we do later on that we can capture it? And if you look at our byline count, I mean, we're writing 20, 30 stories a week during the season. That's, I mean, how many games do they play a week? 5, 6? So there's a ton there. It's just, when a game ends at 11, how many of your stories do you want coming out?
I guess it's just a general feeling about that I have that there's such an incredible appetite amongst fans, regardless of the record.
Yeah.
And our radio and TV ratings show it.
Oh, I agree.
They're dying for it. They want more content.
They do, yeah.
So, give it to them any way you can. This is general.
Yeah.
Around this town.
And it also just depends on, there's so many factors that play into that. Like in St. Louis, that's the only professional sports team there.
Yeah, but it's always been that way, even when they had the St.
the
Louis Rams.
Yeah. But
or the Cardinals, even before that.
Yeah. But here it's like, all right, well, what's going to get into the paper and this and that. And it's, I genuinely feel that if there was a story to be told, we told it.
Yeah.
It's just, it's deciding, is this a today story? Is this a tomorrow story? Is this long form? And you don't always get that right. Right. Like, there's things that you probably, when you're driving home after games, like, I wish I probably could have talked about that more on the broadcast.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
It's tough to...
But even after games, he and I have talked about this down the road, doing something an hour. They do an hour post-game TV show. Mm-hmm. I think there's room for another hour and another hour. And so TV, radio, podcasting, writing, whatever it is, I think people want it. So give it to them. And when you don't, when you quit talking about the team, they're no good, well, then people then do turn to other things
Yeah.
because, well, where there's no content. But there are people out there that want to see it, hear it, take it in.
Yeah, and I think
It's
that
always evolving.
and
It's always
key,
moving.
The key, what you alluded to, is I think it's important to give it in different ways. Like if all you're doing is writing about it, that's one thing. But like my job, even as a beat reporter, isn't just to write. It's,
Oh, I know.
Yeah, like okay, well I'll bring this up on my radio hit on the Fan tomorrow. I'll bring this up on my podcast. I'll bring this up.
And
you
give
know,
different perspectives.
when we do a live show, or this is a good when I'm doing our mailbag. Like we could, I'm sure someone will ask about it here. Let's just put a pin on that, and then if it's more of an opinion, like what do you think about this? I get to talk about my opinion in the mailbag and stuff like that. It's fun. It's fun, and that's what's unique about baseball is, with football you're contained to one game a week, and whatever narratives come out between Monday and Thursday when they're practicing. Baseball, there's a new story every day, and more than one.
Right.
And it's just your
That's why
job
I create
to
more content than any
yeah,
other sport.
yeah, and that's why it's your job to decipher. What's a bullet point, what's a story, what's a story you work on for 5 days, what's a story you work on for 2 months, and everything in between.
Online and hard copies. We're phasing out hard. I can't believe there's still some hard copies,
Yeah.
right? What do you think of that?
I get it. I think that, I don't know. I mean, the hard copy, I see why people like it. I personally like it because I grew up reading it. But I think that online, I mean, it's hard to make someone focus on anything for 2 minutes these days, right?
Yeah, they call it the bull ride.
Right?
You have 8 seconds to grab someone's first.
Correct.
Attention.
And we're in an information age where you just want it now. And that's why guys like Schefter and Shams and Passon get paid so much money. It's like they're not writing a ton. It's just they're able to tweet out 2 sentences, and those sentences captivate the world we live in. And so the digital thing, yeah, I think that you've got to be able to recognize what the grand audience wants. And if you could still feed every mouth at the table, that's great. I think that that's the important part. And I take pride in that. Like, that's why when we came onto the beat, Andrew and I together, we made an emphasis. It's like we're always going to have an in-depth feature run in the Thursday newspaper and in the Sunday newspaper. We will always make sure our 2 best stories we write this week, as far as features go, we can't control, if they lose 11-0, my game story is not going to be as good as a walk-off home run in the 12th, right? That's just facts.
It's going to be about Rowdy Tellez pitching.
Yeah, it could be. But I'm just saying it's not going to be
That's what Shelton would hope it would be.
Right. So, you want to focus on that, but you also want to focus on the new thing. How are we going to get the young Noah Hiles, who's 15 years old, who just loves baseball and loves sports media? He's probably not going to CVS and picking up a hard copy of the Post-Gazette right now. How am I going to make him consume my content? He's probably going to see it on YouTube. He's going to see it on TikTok. He's going to see it on Twitter or X or something like that, and it's going to be in a different thing. So you've just got to figure out how to package it and how to get your message out there and how to reach as many people.
Just wrapping this up, in the other episode you talked about, you just touched on it, that you thought one of the reasons the Pirates kept Cherington and Shelton was because they really believed in their heart of hearts that 2025 was the year, right?
In a way, yeah, I think. I mean, I think that they hoped. Obviously, I don't think they acquired the players this past offseason knowing that this would be the production they would get. But I think that their scope of things was this is going to be a key piece to this, is Skeens and Jones and getting Chandler and Ashcraft and Harrington close. And I don't know what they thought Ortiz or Falter would be. Maybe they thought they'd be this good, maybe not. But I think that in the grand scheme of things, Skeens, more than anyone else, they viewed as, if we're going to win a championship here before 2030, this guy's going to play a significant role in that. And so we need to dedicate this year, a big part of it, to making sure that we set this guy up to be the best he can long term. And if we want to, on a counterpoint, like, yeah, they would have been a better team if they pitched them once every 5 days. But, you know, who's to say that that would have went as what? Would he have ended the year with a sub-2 ERA? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it wouldn't have gone well. Maybe he would have got injured. But they took this route with the 6-man rotation, knowing that, yeah, it might not be what's best for Keller. It might create more bullpen dilemmas where you're down an arm and you have to rely on guys to cover innings. And if they don't, you're, you know, SOL. They did that with the understanding that, like, this is still going to be the better long-term play. So this was more just the mentality that they had that it's like, yeah, this might make it a little harder to win now in 2024, but overall, this is going to make us a lot better of a team moving forward. And that's what I think they were getting at, was in order to completely maximize this weapon that no one else in baseball really has, we have to take this route in 2024. And there's still a path that they could have probably been a better team, right? If Sawinski and Hayes and all these other guys produced, they probably could have been a playoff team. Even bullpen, right? If these things worked out the way they did, they still could have won by this route. But I don't think it was the most ideal route of choice. I think it was the route that they looked at and recognized and said, this is going to be a little bit inconvenient, but this is something we need to do.
Part of me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So you're a fan watching what you just said. So what changes in your mind? This is your opinion piece.
Yeah.
Mailbag.
What changes is you get to use your best weapon way more.
Okay.
Yeah, you get to pitch Paul Skeens more than however many 18 times at the big league level. You get to let him log 200 innings. You obviously, I think another big piece of this year was you got to figure out what you have with O'Neal Cruz here. They clearly made a decision on him, and you can debate whether if that was the right call or not. You can debate the progress he made against lefties, if he hitting enough power or whatever. But I feel like they figured some things out. They also figured out some things are not going well, right? With their hitting development, with Davis, with Sawinski, and all that. But I think to answer your question with the change is, all right, well, we know what we have with Cruz. We know what we have with Skeens. We have an idea, like they already knew kind of what they had with Reynolds. Let's build around this now. Where entering last year, they really didn't even, they had an idea of what they had with this weapon they drafted 1 overall. But now they really know, okay, well, now we know how to use this. And he's prepared to be used how we want to use him.
Yeah, I understand people's angst about not keeping Cherington and Shelton. Get that part of it, no doubt. Change. But I also like, you talk about skin in the game, and Cherington pretty much said that at that press conference. He and Shelton are kind of tied at the hip now.
Yep.
They have come out and said, we have to win. Like 2025 is the no excuses tour.
Yep.
It's huge. So I kind of like that. To your point.
Does it feel like 2013 maybe a little to you?
Maybe. Yeah. Well, this past year felt like 2012.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, where it's like
kind of collapsed.
We saw hints of it.
Yeah.
We didn't have this talent though.
So that's what's interesting to me.
That's the end of the show.
Yep, that's the end of the show.
Yeah.
But that's what's interesting to me is I agree with you where it is like, all right, this is your final chance to kind of piece this puzzle together.
If somebody new comes in, they're gonna have a grace period, a honeymoon. They have to.
Yeah.
That's always happens. But now this is it. So I like the immediacy of it.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's.
But my question is, what's different?
As
a fan, I'm asking the same questions.
Well, the team will be way different come spring training.
That's a question that
I should say.
What will be different? That is interesting.
There will be
like the move that you could say, in 13 they went out and got Russell Martin.
Well, they're going to go out and get somebody.
No
doubt in my mind.
That's the question that needs to be answered. What's going to be different? Who do they hire to be their head of pro scouting? Who do they hire to be their hitting coach, their bullpen coach? What do they do in free agency trade market? What do you do with Henry Davis? What do you do with Brian Hayes? What do you do with Brian Reynolds? Do you play him at first? Do you play him in the outfield still, DH him? Do you bring Kutch back? That's what's going to be different.
You're going to be a busy guy this offseason.
Yeah, that's what I'm enjoying these last couple of days.
Yeah, get ready.
And again, I don't know if it's going to be, I
have a prediction, by the way.
What do you got?
I think for the first time in a while, it's just, as a fan, I know nothing, but they are going to go out and be aggressive way more this year than they have been in years past.
And
so
they should.
As soon as that World Series ends, because you can't sign guys until
Yeah.
or deals and stuff. Baseball doesn't want that. So
But what does that mean?
this is a quiet period. It means they're going to acquire either
Acquire
through
what?
free agency.
Does it mean
or
a
trade.
multi-year deal?
I don't know. But
I think that would be the
they-
start.
For years, they've waited until January
Right.
into
And
February.
I think that's something that
they're
we
gonna
should
go hard
remind
early.
everybody. Russell Martin signed a 2-year deal.
That's
Okay, well,
that's
maybe-
my point.
Well,
Because it's not that if
So to your
you're buying
question,
a
what's
substitute.
different? Maybe that's what's different.
That's what I'm asking you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah.
I
That's
have my own
my.
thoughts.
I'd be willing
and
to bet
as
that.
I've said in other places, that's the start. It's easy. I mean, when you bring in a vet on a 1-year deal, you look at him as, yeah, sure, this is cool. I've watched him do great things, but it's like, is he gonna? If we're 500 at the deadline, is he gonna be here in August? When you sign,
Well, think about him.
when you sign
Think about a free agent signing here. Why
with
would you sign here?
Well,
If you get a multi-year deal, it's a little bit of
and
game
that's
changer.
exactly it. When you can make a statement that says, this isn't just there is no backup plan here. Where when it's a 1-year deal, it's okay. There's always the ripcord.
Yeah.
It's like, no, we're going, we're diving in the pool, you know. And if you sign a free agent, or if you make a substantial trade, you trade for a guy who has 3 years of control, and it's not just a guy who's pre-arb or something, but someone who has a financial commitment on his deal, and you say, we're willing to pay this guy this amount of money for the next couple of years, because we know this is going to make our team better in this window. That's the stance they need to make. That's the statement they need to make.
So, name a couple free agents maybe that you have in the back of your head.
Leading my wish list, if I was a Pirates fan, and I just think the perfect fit for this team, a guy that I look at is Tyler O'Neill. Tyler O'Neill makes this team better in so many ways. Tyler O'Neill has been a part of winning baseball teams. Tyler O'Neill hits 30 home runs. Tyler O'Neill plays excellent outfield defense on the corners. And when you have a new center fielder, I mean, we talked about what could you do with Brian Reynolds? You maybe move him to right, first base, DH. I think in this ballpark, your best defensive outfielder needs to be your left fielder.
100.
And you get Tyler O'Neill, that is absolutely the case. It takes a burden off O'Neill, who's still learning center field. You have a 30 home run bat. You have a guy who's been here before, and that's a guy who's not going to sign on a 1-year deal. That's a guy who's going to take a notable.
He's also somebody you have to trade for.
No, he's a free agent.
He's a free agent.
He's a free agent. He's an unrestricted free agent.
I'll be baffled if he didn't go back
That'd be
To
wild.
Boston.
Yeah.
If it happens, we're bringing you right back.
All right, that's one guy. But I mean,
You know
there's
you want to know my wish list?
yeah,
Bo Bichette.
Bo Bichette.
Yeah, I want to. When you talk about a right-handed power bat,
Where's he playing?
shortstop
Shortstop.
every day, and I sign him to a long-term contract immediately. Because I think that's a loud noise. I think you bring a guy that wants to win. He learned from Tulo. He brings a lot to the table. Defense is above bar, but he's also a guy that brings a lot of tools at the plate. O'Neill, I agree. The only problem is, name a right-handed power-hitting bat that's played in Pittsburgh. I mean, Jason Bay didn't work. That's a huge park, and to say he's going to hit 30 home runs, I'm
Even if he doesn't hit 30, I still
if he
think.
hits-
I mean, if
I
he
do-
hits 20, that's
I'm with
still.
you. I'm
yeah.
with you. But I'm just saying, Bo Bichette, longer term maybe, younger, he's 25. Him O'Neill, exact same age, probably a similar contract if you look at it.
Okay, if the Pirates sign him, then you're coming back to hold my cutter.
Yeah, I mean that'd be a wild move,
Okay.
but I know the Blue Jays need
I-
some pitching too, so we have some depth there. So
Yeah, I
maybe that could
mean,
work.
trade targets. There are some guys that I think make a lot of sense. And
I think free agency's a lot tough.
I think
'cause-
free agency's tougher, especially this year, because you look at this free agent class. There are like 3 or 4, maybe 5 guys who are going to
'cause
get
O'Neill
paid
wants-
really well.
I mean, Tyler O'Neill's probably going to get
$20 million.
easy,
Yeah.
right? I mean, this could be tough.
It's going to be tough,
Yeah.
and you might have to make some moves to clear up within your budget if you're the Pirates to do that. But there are trade guys too. I mean, you want to talk about a splash? Kyle Tucker, go get him.
Yeah, but what would it take?
Who knows? But I mean, how serious are you about winning? Or a guy I was just texting my friends about. Cleveland needs starting pitching right now. What if you went and got like a guy like Stephen Kwan? That would take a
Well,
lot.
that's what I'm saying. Like, so we're talking about scenarios.
Trades.
It's going to happen. You watch.
I don't
That's
know.
what's
I
gonna
don't
be
know if
different.
it'll be
Not
that big of a name. Right.
But
yeah.
they are going to do some things they've not done in at least 5 or 6 years. You watch. It's just going to happen.
And that's what
Well,
you
yeah,
need
I
to
mean,
do.
when your back's against the wall, that's usually
Because
what
You need
that's
happens.
to,
right.
you
That's what
need
I
to
like about
acquire
it.
someone who's going to be
Yep.
here for multiple years, because that's the difference. I don't know if you guys saw, Rowdy was on a podcast this past weekend. He was talking about the differences in clubhouse culture between Milwaukee and Pittsburgh, and he said the vets in Milwaukee, you just had more guys who had been there, and the guys that he mentioned, you look at their names. You talk about Adames. You acquire Adames. Adames had multiple years on his deal when he was acquired by Tampa, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not like a thing where when you bring in a Rowdy or a Santana or a Vogelbach, a 1-year commitment, like
It's a
Art,
stopgap.
like
That's all it is.
like
You're
what
also
Art
bringing-
House said in the movie Moneyball. It's not a huge vote of confidence,
Right.
Right.
If you're going to build around, like, you got to bring in the right guy.
Right.
That's why,
they
like, I
need
brought
their,
up Bo
they
Bichette.
need their Russell
I'd
Martin.
love to have Adames. We're never going to be able to get Adames. And you just look at it, like, Adames is a teammate of mine. He's a friend of mine. I think
Yeah.
the world of him. We cannot get him. You just look at it and say, who can we go out and get that makes our clubhouse better, that is a winner, that adds to that culture, that Skeens and certain guys, obviously.
Ryan
are-
Mountcastle would be a trade target I would look at.
That's an idea, too.
Because, what I like about him is multiple years of control. I mean, Baltimore's got all of these guys. Eventually, one of them's going to have to move to first base. They're going to take priority over him. And Mountcastle's a guy who's kind of seen it through. He's gone through the tunnel that the Pirates are in the middle of right now. And not all the way to the point of a championship, but he's seen how a rebuild's supposed to work, right? Like, where all the talent, and he can say, hey, the guys, like, we're not far away. And he can provide quality, right? And there are pieces in this organization that I'm sure the Orioles would love to have.
One thing we can absolutely agree on, you talked about it, the best podcast you've ever heard or been on. Hold My Cutter.
Hold my cutter.
Ha! It's truth.
Absolutely.
You get the nuance of Hold My Cutter, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a double entendre.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks
A
to
what? A double
entendre.
Look that up.
On Hold My Cutter, thanks to Noah Hiles. Thank you for watching. Like, subscribe on all
Platforms.
platforms.
Yeah, and maybe we'll start our own mailbag because he's inspired me.
Thanks, Noah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.